Here. Hey, everybody. Can you see me? All right. Sweet. Now, I'm watching myself through Zoom on your TV. That's very strange. Hey, everybody. If you're ready to go, let's get started. I got to get myself started here. All right, so go ahead and start pedaling. Gotta see how I can. There we go. Now I can see everybody. All right, we're gonna do a repeat of last week, which I really liked the workout. Not that matters, I guess, but I thought it was really good. There's some ways to change it up as well, make it harder and make it easier. Hi, Patricia. I like the headband. You look like a rock star. Brett Michaels. So before we get into that, you guys may see me stop pedaling every once in a while or not doing the workout. So don't be surprised. On Tuesday, I was unpacking and a kitchen knife fell off the edge of the counter and whoo, smack dab on my foot. And 2 hours later, 7 stitches. We went to urgent care, which if you ever actually have an urgent need, you'll decide that they should change their name to not so urgent care. It was like 5 o'clock. I had to actually walk back into the back offices. It's like, is anybody here? I'm like, my foot's bleeding. I need stitches. So anyway, that's my story. Surprisingly, it doesn't really feel that bad, but probably every once in a while, I'll just check it to make sure that it's not, that my sock hasn't turned red. Yeah, I don't know what the moral of the story is, except for maybe don't keep your knives close to the edge of the counter. But I guess, that's how accidents happen, right? If it wasn't an accident. So anyway, that's me. If you're just getting started, make sure you're in a nice easy gear and then just switch 1 or 2 gears harder every minute or so. So for this workout, we're going to do 10-minute warm-up, 2 by 45 seconds with low cadence, high resistance, and then 2 by 45 seconds with high cadence. Is that Marion? Oh, hi, Marion. And then we're going to do just a minute or 2 easy, like moderate aerobic before we get into the main set, which is 4 by 5-minute blocks. And the main goal of this workout is to raise our intensity. So the other thing, if you ever get a tetanus shot, get it in your non-dominant hand or your arm. They gave me the choice, and I thought, well, my right one's probably stronger, so I'll do it in the right one. But now every time I do this, it's like, that's as far as I can go without being pain. So I should have done it in the left arm. Now I'm distracted. But anyway, 4 by 5 minutes, right? So the purpose is to raise our intensity in the first minute above what I would consider aerobic, but not full out, like to use a running term. It's not 5K effort. It's not all out. It's not hard. It's not painful. It's below that, and it's above our aerobic ceiling. So you can choose your gear. Last time on the second couple sets, I went a gear harder than I was recommending because it brought my intensity level up a little bit higher, but it wasn't so high. So you can play around with your gears. On the same side of it, if that first minute feels too high for you, you can go down 1 gear easier, and you could spend 2 minutes, that first minute and then the second minute in that same gear, right? You can play around with your gears, but the point of the workout is to bring up our intensity and then keep cycling while we recover, because this is very applicable to being out on the road. I think a lot of times when we think we're riding and we want to recover on the road, we just go into a super easy gear or we coast. And you can learn that you can toggle this line between where you just go above your aerobic effort and then you come down a little bit and you get this recovery without coming way down here to recover. So that's what we're working on. We're working on that, really fine-tuning that zone. Right, we all know what easy to moderate is. We know what super hard feels like. And a lot of times when you're maybe new to working on perceived exertion or just realizing effort, you're not so good at fine distinctions between effort. In cycling, that would come down to just one tiny gear change while you're riding. In running, that can be 5-10 seconds per mile difference. And so like a lot of times I like to call it shifting gears. Just by shifting gears when you're running, you can bump it up enough that it takes you to this next level. So it's a gradient really from, your moderate to your super hard. It goes like this. It's not just one step at a time. And so it's good when you can start to really tune in, because that's where you're going to race. If you're doing a longer race, you're going to be a little bit more below that line. If you're doing a shorter race, you're going to be above that line. And it's like a 70.3 where you're really straddling that line. And you want to make sure you don't go too far above it for too many minutes. So that's when you'll have a tendency to get more in trouble. And so it's about going over that line a little bit, coming back. In an Olympic distance, especially if you train for it, you can be above that line for quite a bit. Probably really almost the whole way on the bike, or at least 40 minutes of the bike, above that aerobic ceiling, but below that hard ceiling. So it's just something to keep in mind there. If you guys haven't switched gears yet, go ahead and switch to a harder gear. I'm going to have to calibrate my CompuTrainer in a couple of minutes here. Over my vacation, I was over in Thur doing a lot of mountain biking. And I will say, if you guys ever want to go on vacation right now, I really think going to the woods is a great place because it feels normal. The woods are open. So it's not quite like if you went to another city and, it just feels like being in your city. Everything's closed. Or not everything, but it's just different, right? So it's fun getting out there because you're out on the trails, whether you're hiking or riding a bike, and life just kind of feels more normal. So it was a good getaway. I got in some awesome bike rides. Went on a really great bike ride. I have a gravel bike, and they're great for mixed terrain. So 5 miles on the road, 5 miles on a single dirt track, 5, 6, 7 miles on a dirt gravel road, and then the last 5 miles on a paved road again. Beautiful views of the Methow Valley. I saw a hawk, I saw a buck, a tiny little buck, and then I saw a bald eagle. So that was a pretty sweet ride. All right. You were? Oh, where's that at? Oh, wow. So I'm on the Zoom call and somebody said they're in the same area I was. Did you go to the Mazama store? You're probably far away from that. Oh, sweet. That wasn't you that threw a beer can at me, was it? That didn't really happen. How was the backpacking? Yeah. Whew. I'm trying to calibrate my comfy trainer, and we'll get going here. The knife hit my inside of my left ankle, right on my my malleolus, and I just found the spot that makes it not so comfortable, and that is getting out of the pedal. That's where it put the stress on the stitches. All right, enough about me, enough about Mazama. We're gonna do 2 by 45 minutes low cadence. So get into big chain ring. Ooh. All right, big chain ring. And then we're gonna shift to probably in the middle of the cassette and back or slightly harder. Ready, we're gonna go 45 seconds, here we go. So shift down, maybe 3 or 4 clicks. You wanna get it to where your legs start to really slow down. And you wanna get it to where you can feel the pedal stroke all the way through. So you're just trying to develop that feel of pressure in the pedal stroke. We're not working super hard right now. And your cadence is probably pretty low. Mine's 70, 68. But just try to develop that feel. Okay, recover. So you can either go the small chain ring or you can go the easy gear in your big chain ring. So now just spin it out. On this next one, maybe choose one gear harder or keep in the same gear and try to lift your cadence a little bit. Either one should bring up your heart rate, should bring up the intensity. It's also good. Okay, here we go. So shift to a harder gear, maybe same gear you're in, and maybe just try to go a little bit faster cadence. It's still not gonna, it still should be below 80. But you can feel that it's, you can feel the intensity rise. Probably also notice that you may have to engage your core more. All right, recover. So either easiest gear in the big chain ring, which again, remember, is you still have 2 gears you're not going to use, or small chain ring. But just really want to take all the resistance out of the pedals. And this, by the way, this gear you're in right now, if you are going to take a full recovery on the road, pedaling like this is better than not pedaling. The places you should not pedal are when it's safer to not pedal. So if maybe you stop pedaling because there's an intersection, a driveway, a corner, you're going downhill so fast you run out of gears. There are times when you don't pedal, but in general, pedaling increases blood flow, which increases recovery. Okay, now we're gonna go high cadence. So you might be able to do this in the big chain ring in just one of the easier gears. So let's go 45 seconds. So pick a gear, should be just moderate resistance. but really work on bringing up your pedal stroke. Ideally, get to that place where your body starts to jump around, and then try to quiet your body. Bring your belly button in, elongate your spine, push your sit bones into your seat. All right, recover. So one thing that I really would love you guys to do when you're out riding is, if you have cadence on your bike, start paying attention to your cadence on a normal ride, and then see if you can lift it like 5 beats. So from 85 to 90, from 90 to 93. So somewhere in there, like 3 to 5 beats. And just see how it feels. And then also see if you can lift it without lifting your intensity. So the first thing that's going to happen is your intensity is going to go up. But if you shift to an easier gear, your intensity will come back down, but keep your cadence up. So see if you can raise your cadence. Okay, here we go again. One more. See if you can raise your cadence outside without really spiking your effort and your intensity. And what you may find is that with the faster cadence, your speed goes up outside. And if we can keep your intensity the same as it was, you'll be riding faster. It'll become more comfortable. Initially, it can be a little bit, can feel a little harder because you're not used to it. But if you're already riding at 92, 93, then it's maybe less of a issue than if you're riding at 80. All right, recover. But what I found is that in general, if left to our own devices and you haven't ever looked at cadence and you're new to cycling or haven't ever paid attention to it, it's really easy to pedal at like 80 because it's just like a country stroll. It just, feels good. It's not that taxing. But then when you want to accelerate, you're accelerating in a harder gear, still at 80. And that puts you under a lot more muscular load. And so it's actually, when you want to go faster, it's going to be harder on you. So that's part of it too, is getting it to where you can accelerate without it being as taxing on you. Okay. Mentha, can you guys are you guys talk to each other, or am I I'm not hearing anything. Now I hear you. It's like a silent movie. Okay, where are we at? So we are 18 minutes in. We're gonna do another minute, just moderate. So this should be solidly aerobic. You can talk, you can breathe. This is where, this effort when you're out on the road requires little to zero concentration. And then as your intensity goes up, you have to focus a lot more. When we get into, what I would call hard, the focus is super intense and you really can't hold another thought. As you get into, just uncomfortable or moderately hard, which is where we want to go in that first minute, you can kind of hold the thought, but your brain is going back and forth with, your body wanting to slow down and be like, no, you can keep going. That little mind back and forth. All right. If you want to go easier, maybe start in the small chain ring. I think most of you can start in the big chain ring. So let's get in the big chain ring and get in your easiest gear. So remember, 2 gears you're not going to use. So number 3 from the spokes. We're going to shift 4 times when we start. And then each minute we're going to go back 1. Okay, you guys ready? 3, 2, 1. Here we go. So 4 gears. 1, 2, 3, 4. All right. Now bring your cadence up. So probably a better way of doing that would have been to get my cadence up to 90 before shifting gears. I don't know if you did what I did. It takes a lot of work now to get it back up higher. So next time we do it, we're going to do it differently. But this, I think, is a good example of what I was talking about. Is it's much more challenging to shift while in a low cadence, because like now I'm still at 81, but if I had started at 90 before shifting gears, it would have been a little better, smoother. All right, so 1 shift easier now, and let's get the cadence up to 90. So right now, like you're a little winded, but you can maybe feel just the slight beginnings of recovery. You're not working as hard. But you're still working. You know, this to me is like, this effort right here is probably kind of like right in between a half Ironman and an Olympic, or it's where I would spend some time in both races. Maybe more time and a half. Olympic, I would want to go a little bit harder than I'm going right now. All right, here we go. 1 gear change easier. Now, hopefully, you guys can give me some hand signals on Zoom. Does this feel like a much easier gear that you can ride? Yeah. Give me a thumbs up or thumbs down. Thumbs up. Nice. So for me, you know, when I talk about gear of choice, this is probably my gear of choice, in that my legs are moving nice and fast. I'm actually recovering while I'm riding rather than going up in intensity. Yeah, maybe try 1 easier, in which we're going to go to in 10 seconds. So somebody was saying that they're maybe 1 gear higher than their gear of choice, so switch 1 gear easier. And this is where I would say, go ahead and play around with that. Like you could go down to 1 gear easier. And you guys can also, you have permission to change gears within the minute. So let's say on that last one, you think maybe I'm a little bit higher intensity than I want to be. Go ahead and just switch 1 gear easier. That might only be for 10 seconds. And then you can go back. So right now, Menta, how do you feel? Because like, for me, you know, it's like starting to feel almost like getting into the recovery. And it could be too, you know, this is where it's tricky, because I think you only have 9 gears on your bike. So in all fairness, when we go 4 gears, you know, you're going 5 gears, right? Because you have, okay, 1 gear easier, everybody. So because you only have 9 gears, that means there's 2 you're not using, and then you have 7 left. So when you go 4 clicks, you're going, well, you're ending up with like 2 remaining, right? When you get down to your hardest gear. And for me, I still have like 4 remaining. And so my gear was a lot easier than your gear. So this is a good, you know, this is why it can be challenging, because you're on a different bike setup and you have less options. So for you, I would say you could try this next time. You could go maybe just 3 clicks harder and stay there for minute 1. And then for minute 2, you could just stay there as well and see how that feels, and maybe go down 1 easier or back and forth in the second minute. Okay? Because you have less gear. So let's try. We're going to go in like 5 seconds. So let's first, okay, here we go. So we're going to go, but get your cadence up. So get your cadence up nice and high, then switch to a harder gear and keep your cadence up. And now switch to a harder gear, that's 2. And then now switch again. And if you're going to go one more, go one more. And so you can see the difference in the transition between how I did it last time, where I just went straight into 4 gears harder, and my cadence just took a long time to get back up. And if this starts to feel too hard, go 1 gear easier. If you feel like you want more effort, either raise your cadence or 1 gear harder. All right, we're going to switch 1 gear easier in 3 seconds. Okay, switch. And then meant that you might be in the same gear, or you can go 1 gear easier and maybe toggle right now. But you guys should have felt immediately when you shifted gears, you should feel that your cadence kind of bumps up just because the gear got easier. So right now, for me, I'm thinking this is just right below uncomfortable. So I like to say between moderate and moderately hard. It's not like comfortable, it's not uncomfortable, just kind of a gray zone between the two. So it's right at maybe slightly above my aerobic ceiling. Okay, 3, 2, 1, 1 gear easier. So let's do this. If you're not right now in a gear that you might describe as your gear choice, then change gears. Maybe that's easier, maybe it's harder, but essentially this should start to feel comfortable. And you should be able to spin at a high cadence like 90, even a little above. The only thing that maybe should require some concentration is keeping your legs going, but not the effort itself. So I'll tell you another really good way for racing as the race gets longer. After we're gonna do a gear change in 10 seconds. All right, 1 gear easier. Okay, and you can play around with this out on the road too. So find your gear of choice, and remember, depending on the terrain, that gear will be different. You know, it's not just one single gear. If you're going downhill, your gear of choice is going to be 1 or 2 gears harder than if you're going flat. And if you're on a slight incline, it would be 1 or 2 gears easier. But get in your gear of choice and then go 1 gear easier, and notice what happens to you physiologically. So if you're doing a long race, or you're doing, like say, an Olympic distance, and you want to make sure you don't go out too fast, get into your gear of choice and then switch 1 gear easier. And that'll keep you at an effort that you can go longer. And then in the second half of the race, if you're like, oh man, I feel great, you can either ride in your gear of choice or start toggling between 1 gear harder in your gear of choice. If it's a double loop course, like say an Ironman, it's actually a really good strategy to do your first half of the race in 1 gear easier than your gear of choice, because it forces you, so 1 gear easier, it forces you to ride, it prevents you from riding too hard, right? And in a longer race, whether it be a running race, a triathlon, the number one mistake that we make is to go out too fast. And so you can use your gears on the bike as a way of preventing yourself from going out too fast. Just find that gear of choice, go one gear easier, stay there. Maybe every 15 minutes, you just check in and say, okay, because you might find yourself gravitating back towards your gear of choice. And then you just keep checking in and say, okay, I want to do one gear easier, right? You can do the same thing. It's a great workout. You can do the same thing. Like you could do, here would be a really great workout, just off the fly. Okay. So we got to start again. Okay, we're going to go again. So think about what gear you want to shift into. So we're going 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Here we go. Get your cadence up and then start shifting your gears. So again, this first minute, we wanted to get into the uncomfortable. Okay, so great workout on the fly. You're going to spend 10 minutes out on the road in your gear of choice. And again, that you may have to shift gears while you're riding, depending on the terrain. Then you're going to go, like, we'll start with, say, either 5 minutes or 3 minutes in one gear harder than your gear of choice. So just at like no more than half the amount of time that you spend in your gear of choice. So if you have better fitness, you can do 5 minutes. If this is new to you, you can do 2 minutes. Okay, one gear easier now. So 10 minutes gear choice, a couple minutes, one gear harder, then go down 2 so that you go down past your gear of choice to one gear easier and spend 10 minutes there. And then what you could do is just spend like 5 minutes, one gear easier than that. So if you did 10, 5, 10, and 5, that would be a 30-minute block, right? And what you would, it would just be a good workout so you start to see how your body responds in and around your gear of choice, in and around those different gears, because that's all feedback, and you can use that information when you're riding. All right, we're gonna go one gear easier here. Ready, go. So meant to, like for you with less gears, it could be a place where you may actually need to start in the big chain ring and then on some of these easier ones, shift to the small chain ring. You know what I mean? You might need to use both chain rings. It also depends on how easy it is for you to ride in the big chain ring. Like I would be curious if one of your easier, if your 2 easy gears in the big chain ring feel easy, or do they still feel like you're working? Okay, one gear easier. Yeah, so for you, you know, because you have less gears, you probably need to be in your small chain ring right now. So like what you could do next time is you could try, like where we're at now, in the easy big chain ring, you could go 2 gears harder and then 1 gear down. And then on the third change, go into your small chain ring. And Maureen is in the same boat. I think she has she has a triple, right? So yeah, she's probably in the same boat because she probably only has 9 gears. So yeah, a little different. Yeah, no, it's really good because like, you know, you're on a bike setup that's not necessarily fair in the sense that you're probably thinking like, man, why everybody else seems fine and I'm just dying here, right? You know, and everybody else would be too if their gears were the same. The other thing that we'll go in 30 seconds, but your rear cassette, like almost always now, if I buy a bike, I change the rear cassette because it doesn't come with enough gears in the back. So let's start here in 10 seconds and I'll tell you more about that. So this is the last one. So if you really want to go for it, this is the time. So 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay, bring your cadence up. Bring your cadence up before you switch gears. Then let's find that gear that makes you feel uncomfortable. You want the breathing to be hard. So like I know I'm more in that zone because I want to wait to tell you about the gear change. I don't want to talk right now, right? This is how you know you're in that where it's supposed to be. It's also harder to think. Okay, one gear easier. Okay, much better. Whew, so I'm still working, but I can actually think. So a lot of times, maybe the newer bikes now come with better gearing, but you can count the number of teeth on your biggest, easiest gear in the back. And let's say it has 25 teeth. Well, you can easily buy a new cassette, which is a group of gears, that goes up to 27 or 28. And there's a huge difference between when you're on a 25 or a 28. And the 28 makes it much easier to go uphill. So you might, when we get done, just count the number of teeth on your biggest, easiest gear and back. And if you have questions, let me know. But just know that if you have a 23 or a 25, you can get a much better cassette. Okay, one gear easier. Shouldn't say better. You can get a cassette that will give you a lot more choices on hills. I think I just went into chat somehow. So you can change your riding experience just by changing your cassette, especially if you're doing like a hilly course, or if you ride a lot of hills, then you can go to that easier gears just by having a new cassette. So on all my bikes, because like when I bought my bikes, like they would come with a 21 or a 23 or a 25. And then it was something that never dawned on me that I could and should change my cassette. And then I went to a 27. I started riding a 27. And I was like, man, it made me feel like 3 years younger. I was like, this is fantastic. And then a year or 2 later, they came out with a 28. So one gear easier now. So like initially, an 1128 wasn't an option. And then, I don't know what happened. I lost you guys in Zoom. But now a 28 is an option. In fact, now a lot of bikes might even come with like a 32 in back, which is like a really easy climbing gear. So just know that if your gearing doesn't have something more than a 25, you're really working a lot harder on anything that's an incline than your friends. And so that's a good point. I think what like happened with Mintha today is just, you know, maybe you're working harder, has nothing to do with your fitness, but has everything to do with your availability of gear choice. And I rode with a lot of friends who were training for Ironman, and we all had like similar bikes. Okay, go to the small chain ring and recover. Small chain ring, kind of somewhere in the middle. We all had similar bikes, and then, you know, it would just come out over time. You'd be riding along, and somebody would be struggling going uphill, but you know that they kind of have the same fitness as you. And then you look over, and you're like, oh man, you need to get you a, you know, they would call it, say, a 1227, which is the 12 is the smallest gear, 27 is the bigger one. So 1227, or they might say an 1128, meaning 11 gear, 28. So the smaller this gear is here, the faster you go. right? So if you only have 10 teeth, 11 teeth, you're going to turn the wheel over faster than if you have 12 teeth. But you can only gap so much in gears. Like you think it's like 2, right? So if you have a 27, maybe it's 3. If you have a 27, the next one has to be a 25, then a 23, and then a 19 or a 21, a 19, 17, 15. And so a lot of times on the smaller range cassettes, they would go 12, 13, 14, 15, 17, 19, 21, 23, right? Because then you have, the idea is that you have a tighter range switching from 11 to 12 to 13. That's a tighter range than going 11 to 13 and skipping 12 altogether. But where you really feel it is when you're climbing. You don't really notice it so much in these fast gears, because you tend to use those when you're going downhill more. You tend to need the easier gears more than you need the harder gears. And then the other thing that factors into it is your cranks. So if you count the number of teeth on your crank, traditionally, the biggest one had 53 teeth. Then about 10 years ago, they introduced what they called a compact crank. It only had 50 teeth. And so that basically lowers your gear range so that maybe you don't need, it changes what happens in the back of the cassette, right? And same thing, like traditionally, your small chainring would be 39 teeth. But if you go to a 36 teeth, then you don't maybe need a 28 in back because you have 36 up front. So it changes the ratio. And then now they have what's called a mid-compact, which is 52 teeth on the big one. And so your front can change it too, but really your front one, you probably don't need to worry about it so much. I would count the number of teeth on your easiest gear in the back. And especially if you're 23, but if you're 25 and sometimes you're climbing and you think, man, I wish I had a easier gear, then, you should spend $60. That's probably for an Ultegra component. If you had 105, it's probably more like $40. And those are super easy to change. If you live locally, I can change it out for you. You do need a specific tool, but it takes like 10 minutes to change out. But if you put on that cassette, you're not going to notice anything in your harder gears. But when you start climbing, and it's not even like huge climbs, just like rolling climbs, and you're able to pick that 27 or 28 gear, or in some cases, maybe even like a 32, it just opens up a whole world for you. And then you should definitely, because not the older bikes, even my bike, which is only like 4 years old, probably can't take a 32 in back because the derailleur hanger is not long enough. So you do want to just check with the bike shop, say, hey, what cassette could I put back here? And how much would it cost? And that will give you more options. So anyway, try that out. Let's do this. Where you're at, let's go on the big chain ring, and it's going to be a huge jump, which I want. I just want you to stand up a bit and just let the legs, so nice and easy. You might even start to feel your weight shift back and forth. Okay, go ahead and sit down, and then shift 2 gears easier. Now, when you're outside and you want to stand up, generally speaking, you should shift 1 or 2 gears harder. So let's shift 2 gears harder, and then maybe if your legs just pump down, then you maybe need to go 1 gear harder. Because when you stand up, you have so much more power on the pedals. So sit down now, and let's go 2 or 3 shifts easier. So the reason I did that is I wanted you to see that you can stand up without skyrocketing your perceived exertion, your effort. So you can just do it, and you can kind of pedal casually. But sometimes, places where standing up is good. Say you're on a steady climb, you might stand up every 2 minutes just for 4 or 5 pedal strokes, just to change up muscle groups. And then when you sit down, you'll notice you have a lot more power in the middle of your climb. You may need to switch gears. Like when you sit down, you may need to go 1 or 2 gears easier. And when you stand up, you may need to go 1 or 2 gears harder. But the more you do it, the more you learn from that. So another great place to stand up is right at the top of a climb. So let's say you're coming up the climb and you still have some energy in you, and then you want to go over the flat or the downside, and you don't want to just stop and recover at the top. Well, you can just stand up right as you crest the top. And that gives you that little boost of power. And then when you sit down, you have more power, and so you can keep going over the top. So play around with that when you're outside. And then the other place where standing is great, and you may have figured it out of necessity, especially if you don't have the right gearing, is when you're out of gears. Sometimes you're climbing something and you're just simply out of gears and you have no choice. Well, if you stand up, that's like 1 or 2 extra gears, and that'll get you over the top. Thanks, Marion. All right, let's just do 20 seconds easy. So anyway, hopefully that helps. It's good to see you guys on Zoom. All right, I'm done. You're done. If you want to keep riding, keep riding. I will see you Monday, and I'll have to look at it, but I know it's a tough one. All right, see ya.